Well, so first of all, let me say thank you for the invitation to be here. It's a real delight to be here in Surrey with you, the community that is UPEN. And I particularly wanted to congratulate you on the way you've grown from being a volunteer-led organisation to a fully funded, really future-facing one. I think it's a big shift you're making there. And let me tell you that we absolutely welcome it in government, because your work really matters. We need places like universities that absolutely value truths as evidenced to help us make good decisions in government, to help us deal with the growing problem of mis and disinformation, telling people things that are not just untrue, but damagingly untrue. And I'll be absolutely honest with you, it is not really clear to us what the way forward is there. So I think that's something we're all going to have to work on in the future and start to fight back using our sort of profound values about the importance of truth. We greatly welcome the fact that academics all over the country are answering our call from the central government to please come and help us. We were very worried after COVID and after the sort of the frankly unpleasantnesses of the COVID inquiry that people would stop wanting to come and help government. And actually that's just not the case at all. I find every time one of the things I do in my job is I run a network of chief scientific advisors across government. Every government department has one. And they leave. It's terrible. It breaks my heart. It's like having children grow up and leave home. And then I have to get new ones. I mean, it's not me, really, but the departments have to get new ones. I almost always sit on the appointments panels. And there's always this moment when I open the applications document and my heart goes, and we just get fantastic applications for these jobs. So I'm really glad to say that it feels like the legacy of COVID is quite the opposite from frightening people off. And instead, I think it's shown that people like yourselves really can make a difference, not only for government, but through government for your fellow citizens. So I think this job that you do of knowledge mobilisation is really an important one, connecting the right voices to the right questions. We were just talking about how important it is to get the question right. Now, this term knowledge mobiliser actually was not one I knew. And Carrie came to me and she said, Angela, do you know what knowledge mobiliser is? And I'm not a great one for having new words when I thought I had a perfectly good one, so I wrinkled my nose a bit. But actually, I've been thinking about it the last few days, and actually I really like the word. So I used to think of myself as a knowledge broker, but actually brokers sell things. And I don't sell knowledge at all. And actually, of course, when I hear broker, I think of stockbroker. I worked as a stockbroker for a while. I know quite a lot about stockbroking. And I would like to think that what we're doing is sort of much, what's the word? We're not trying to persuade government to buy the knowledge we choose to sell to them today, right? We are trying to help find the right knowledge, including the dissonant voices, the voices that don't say the same thing, to help my colleagues in government see that expertise that you absolutely have. Here are the things we all agree on. Briefly, here's why. And then here's the places where there's disagreement. And this is why there is disagreement. And ideally, if we could resolve this one thing, that disagreement would then resolve, and it would be we'd be in a safer place making policy based on it. So that business of finding all the voices, figuring out where they agree and where they disagree, I think mobilising is a great word for it. So I'm delighted to have changed who I think I am. And I think there's another thing that I expect you all know. It took me quite a long time in my knowledge mobilisation career to realise that this business of taking that evidence and turning it into action is extremely difficult. So in the civil service, we would call that delivery. I always used to think, oh, well, we just need to tell them, the right thing to do, and then they can get on and do with it. But of course, that's not true for civil servants. The business of delivery is really the work of the civil service, because it's very, very difficult. Money is always constrained. You wouldn't really want to have a government that had more money than it knew what to do with. because at the end of the day, it's your money. So money is always constrained. Some people are easy to find. Some people are very, very difficult to find when you are trying to deliver government services to them. And actually, that is something that I do wonder if it's, certainly there wasn't much of it in my, where is the science of delivery, I think is my question to you. Perhaps we can talk about that later. Because it's, we don't, I can tell you, I don't, well, colleagues might correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we talk much about what are the good ways of doing delivery in the Government Office for Science, and looking at how hard it is across my civil service colleagues, I wonder if we're missing a trick there. So I've been doing knowledge mobilisation through a lot of my career. I worked in a department, so the zoology department in Oxford. It was a sort of cool thing to do. So Bob May, who held what I think of now as my job, was Government Chief Scientific Advisor probably when I joined the department. John Krebs had run the Food Standards Agency, and across Oxford there always were lots of chief scientific advisors. So perhaps I was very lucky in that I sort of grew up as an academic in an environment where spending some of your time flogging up to London and doing science advice was viewed as a cool thing to do. I mean, I've since met people. I've since met people in other academic settings who, first of all, don't know the difference between people like you, so academic policy advisors, and SPADs, so special. I think it's paid or political. Well, anyway, they are political. Who are the people, and they're the people who are sort of in the thick of it. If you ever watch that, who are doing a very different job. Really a very different set of expertise from ours, much more about how would a politician expect any particular piece of policy to be received by the voting public. Just a different kind of expertise from ours. But I remember being completely astonished that I had grown-up colleagues who didn't understand the difference between someone trying to advise on science for policy and a SPAD, like chalk and cheese. So, as I say, I was lucky to grow up in this environment where it was very much looked on as a good thing to do with your time. I must say, it did not ever occur to me when I was whatever I was in my late 30s, and Bob May was being government chief scientific advisor, and it was my complete and utter hero that one day I might do that job. And it's sort of been, it's one of the really nice things about getting older, is you start to think, oh, well, maybe I could. And various things that people you admire have done become, a job you can apply for, and if you're lucky, get it. So I think perhaps you could describe almost all the work I do probably is knowledge mobilisation. So thank you for inviting me today. I'm very happy to join you all as knowledge mobilisers. So why does that matter? It matters because government really does need help finding good evidence upon which to make its decisions. I don't think you'd find a civil servant who would say, oh no, I'm not interested, I don't do evidence-based policy making. But civil servants have to do policy making pretty fast some of the time, and sometimes that means that they don't have time, let's say, to access the best evidence. So I think that's our role, your role, is to make it easy and fast for people making policy at what in the military we used to call the pace of relevance, which means bloody fast, to find the evidence that will help them make a good decision. Why does that matter? Because policy made on poor evidence very often turns into expensive mistakes. And sometimes one thinks, oh God, saving money is so hard, what are we going to do? But actually, if you dig deep, you find money being wasted. I mean, on insane, terrible things. And that's a great, straightforward way to save a lot of money. I'm not going to tell you the story today of the £300 million science saved for the military whilst I was GCSA there. But it did. It was done by our external advisors, and it was tremendously useful, because every time anybody says to me, well, it's quite expensive, the CSA's network, I can point at these sorts of examples and say, these people are probably saving about 1,000 person years worth of their salary each time they pick up one of these big mistakes you're making. Because when government makes mistakes, they tend to be quite big, expensive mistakes. So those are one of the reasons why I really think it matters. Carrying on to talk, I want to talk to you a bit about why it's so hard for us. Well, actually, we in government are not lifelong academics, obviously. I mean, some of us, so a tiny number of us are. There's the Chief Scientific Advisors Network. Most of us are academics who, you better wave at me when it gets time to start stopping, because I could.
When I get bored.
Oh, I know. No, because I really want to have our conversation too. So most civil servants left university after a first or second degree. And actually, let's face it, those of us who work in universities know that PhD students don't actually understand how universities work. So it's one of the really important things to do is to help civil servants and other policymakers, of course, in other bits of government, find their way around the sort of the systems of knowledge that you know like the back of your hand. And that's why all of us need to work together to make these sort of structured, transparent ways to connect so that the right expertise can get to the right person in time. And one of the ways we think is working really, really well towards making that easy is these things called areas for research interest. So these documents written by government departments, overseen by the Chief Scientific Advisor, explaining what are their open questions. Seems sensible, right? Why don't you, government department, write down a list of the stuff that you don't know and that you need help from all of our knowledge workers and researchers in the university sector to go away and help you sort out. And actually, we're tremendously grateful to UPEN for all your fantastic work to promote these ARIs, as we call them, and to connect departments with the right bits of the academic community. For example, I know you've hosted lots of launch events for those. We were very excited, actually, it must be about a year ago now, to launch a database, a sort of much better searchable database where all these questions are in one place. So instead of having to crawl your way through loads and loads of different PDFs, you can do much easier searching. I don't know how many of you have ever read the Defence ARIs. When I was applying to be the Chief Scientific Advisor at the Ministry of Defence, I did go away and read the Defence ARIs. They are what we might call gnomic. They don't quite say, what do we need? Oh, we need to win wars. But it more or less says that. And you can see, and of course, there is some, you can see why. The one thing you don't want to tell the whole world is, well, here are the things we're really worried about because we know we're very bad at them. I mean, that would be that's kind of anti-deterrence, isn't it? It's the absolute opposite of what you're trying to do. So I think, well, I can say this actually, having been the CSA in the MOD, I have a nasty feeling they still haven't been updated. So actually, that would be my hint to you. If you go away and read our ARIs and look for a date when they were last updated. And if they're out of date, write to the CSA. Write to the CSA, say, I noticed your ARIs were last updated in 2018 or something. Well, actually, you could really help us by saying, any suggestion about when you're going to update them, please? Because we do that, but it'd be really helpful if you would do that too. I wouldn't spend much time on a set of ARIs that are more than 5 years old. What else could we do to use them as well as we could? Well, I think one of the things that we slightly worry about is, are we doing enough to tell you, the external experts, about their existence, about the kind of conversation we hope they are going to foster? So our fantasy is that one of you reads an ARI and then either says, oh, well, actually, that's something I work on myself, or says, I know the person who works on that in my university. I'm going to take it to them and say, look at this thing. Then actually, I think the next thing you should do is contact the CSA and say, I'm interested in this thing, put me in touch with the person who wrote it. I wouldn't go away and write a grant until you've had a conversation with the person who generated the ARI. Because I think, as we were talking about earlier, the way the question is written, the difference between the question that gets written down and the question that actually exists can be quite large. And I think we all recognise that, don't we? When we're asking questions about something we don't really understand, we might not couch the question very well. And there's always an element, particularly in sort of more technical parts of what we all do, where if you're not very knowledgeable, you will do the equivalent of saying, well, I'd like a faster horse, please. I've got this thing I do now, I just want to do the thing I do now better. And after all, the people we're talking about is, why should they know that there might be some entirely new way of thinking about and addressing that particular problem? So get in touch. And the CSA should be your front door into a government department for that sort of question. Finally, my years of. So I am now in, gosh, what am I in? I'm in month 3 of my year of adaptation. After I'd been in this role for, I guess, about 10 months, and I talked about nothing but artificial intelligence, which I think is fantastic and interesting. I thought, if I'm not careful, I'm going to talk about nothing but artificial intelligence for 5 years. And there's plenty of people talking about artificial intelligence. We in Go Science can do our part of steering that conversation and keeping it up the more realistic end of what's going on. But I want to do other things too. So I said, right, I'm going to invent this thing, and it's going to be the Government Chief Scientific Advisor's year of. So, because it's my absolute favourite subject, the first year of was the year of engineering biology. So for me, that makes a very easy answer to the question, well, you're going to this place, Angela, what do you want to see? The answer is engineering biology. But also, because we were quite often government's quite gloomy. It's quite a sort of, I think perhaps I miss all the young people universities and all that optimism. So sometimes being a civil servant, you can have to think, oh my God, it's all so bad. And actually, I know that with engineering biology, you might also heard it described as synthetic biology. My goodness, it is not all bad. It is really exciting, positive stuff. I mean, one of the questions it addresses is, well, as we switch away from using fossil fuels, as we stop pulling oil out of the ground, which we fundamentally do in order to burn the petrol, gosh, where are we going to get everything else from? Because, you know, we over whatever it is, how many hundreds of years is it? Anyway, over time, we have learned how to use every bit of that. Do you remember that fractionated column you did in GCSE, whatever it would be, chemistry, I suppose? There's all this stuff that we make and use, probably this carpet, certainly, I'm not sure if this is metal or plastic. There are all these things that are basically byproducts of the fact that we burn petrol that we're going to have to find other ways to make. And engineering biology is going to be the answer to that. And it's just tremendously exciting because fundamentally what it is, I think, is it says, well, in the second half of the last century, we learned how to read DNA. In the first quarter of this century, we've learned how to really quite precisely edit DNA, and we're really just on the cusp now of really understanding it. So we have reasonably good folding prediction software now with AlphaFold, and that puts us really onto the cusp of understanding the genotype-phenotype problem, which is just such a fantastic question in science. And that means, you know, the engineering is in our grasp. We can take biological material and bend it to our will to make the things we need. For me, that's actually quite a lot more exciting than AI. I mean, I love AI, but not as much as I love engineering biology. Sorry, that was last year. This year is my year of climate adaptation, and that does stem from a sense that I get very firmly in effectively my tutorials with Baroness Brown, chair of the Adaptation Committee, that there is just not enough going on. I do not have to break out a fancy mathematical model to say to you, the climate's changing. You know, the climate is changing. All of us probably still remember the first 40-degree day here. I mean, that's pretty weird. And actually, this academic year, one of the quotes that absolutely sticks in my mind is the wonderful Chief Scientific Advisor, Sarah Sharples, in the Department for Transport, saying, we were having a conversation about adaptation, and she said the following words, well, it's only September, and already the railways are underwater. And, you know, the climate has changed. We have an infrastructure that was built for a climate that has gone, and it's not coming back. And the answer to that is to adapt. there are many things that we have to change. A whole load of stuff in our built infrastructure, but also a whole load of things in ways we behave. Are we going to go on making children and undergraduates sit exams in June? We don't have to. There are lots of things we can do. And I think that letting go, though, you know, saying to ourselves, you know, that the climate of your childhood isn't coming back, is really hard work. And I think there's an interesting set of questions about how are we going to do that? How will we do that letting go work? And I also think that in adaptation there are massive growth opportunities. It's not obvious where to do the investments that we need to do. It boils down to a very interesting piece of work in risk analysis. And we have lots of the bits of information we need. We have some of the best maps in the world. We know where our stuff is. We have some of the best flood prediction available to anybody in the world. So we know when it floods where the water will go. But what we don't have is the joining up that lets us know if that electricity substation floods, then what happens? And there's a super interesting piece of work to do there it's a mapping job really, but it's a sort of digital twin, complicated mapping job about, well, what's vulnerable, what's going to break, what do we have to protect, and I think there's so much interesting work there because, of course, to do that calculation, you must start by asking, what do I care about? So I think it requires all of us to think about what is both the near and the longer term future going to be for us with this new climate that we have now and that hasn't finished changing yet. So I'm going to stop now so we can have a chat. There are lots and lots of ways to engage with us. I'm delighted to see you all here, and I hope that by being here, you are people who are interested in engaging with policy. Please do make use of the ARI documents. Please also, you know, sign up for the kinds of things that we advertise. The advisory council work, the intern work. We actually keep, is there going to be a list here? We definitely have on Go Science, in Go Science, a sort of list of ways that you could come and engage with us in government if you would like to. Come and find me later and I will try and remember what the URL is. We're really interested to build capability, to build capacity and capability with you because your work does have impact. We need to keep pushing together to make sure that it's visible, that we ask you the right questions, and that you know what a good answer looks like for us. Because a good answer to a policymaker is not the same as a good piece of academic work. It's a different thing. And that we can work together then in order to generate really great results. So let us carry on the work of making a smarter, stronger interface between research and policy.